What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Artists of Data Science Happy Hour. It's Friday, May 28th. Super excited to have all of you guys here today. Today is brought to you by Data Science Dream Job, the platform where I am principal mentor. If you guys are interested, check out dsdj.co/free training to check it out. Hopefully, you guys got an opportunity to tune into the podcast, had a really interesting episode. Well, all my episodes I feel like are interesting, but this one was really cool. I talked to Dave Gray, author of several best-selling books, including Liminal Thinking. I thought it was an interesting conversations about belief systems and trying on new beliefs. And I really enjoyed talking to him. I felt like the conversation got off to a rough start, but we started to warm up to each other, and I ended up being a really good episode after that. Speaking about belief systems, let's talk real quick. What was one thing that you believed you had to do or had to know as a data scientist when you first started your career? Looking back now, you're like, oh man, that belief was totally incorrect. I'd love to hear what that is. I mean, for me, I think the one belief that I had uh, when I first started out that is now completely wrong is I had this belief that I had to have an answer for everything. I believe that my job as a data scientist was to know everything about data science under the sun, and I had to have an answer for everything. Even if the answer was wrong, I just needed to say something and have something come out of my mouth so I didn't have to look like I didn't know what I was talking about. That has since changed because I've learned the power of simply saying, I don't know. Um, so I'd love to hear what that one belief you had at the beginning of your career that you now look back and say, dude, that was a completely incorrect belief. Let's start off with my friend Christian. Christian, go for it.
That's funny. I was just thinking that your story is probably relatable to a lot of people. The beginning of my career was definitely more like data, not data focused. Data was later. First was all business, right? And so you're sitting in a room with people who have been doing it a lot longer than you, making a lot more money than you, and they look at you and ask a question. You don't feel like you should say I don't know, but what you find out is that it's worse to make something up. So I learned that lesson as well early on. I would say with regards to data, it's like when I first started really messing with it, I had this idea that there's always an answer there, and I just have to look hard enough to find it. But sometimes that's just not the case. There's nothing to extrapolate from certain data sets, and it's either not enough or there's no message there for what you're looking for. And again, it's just another way of saying sometimes you got to say I don't know, or the answer's not here, and move on.
Yeah, that's it. That's an interesting point, right? Because we're so used to having data sets kind of handed to us when we're learning. They're contrived data sets that have some bit of predictive power in them. But when we go into the real world, we believe that there should be some type of predictive power in every data set that we have. And sometimes that turns out that that is not the case. I'd love to hear from Makiko on this. Makiko, I don't know if you got kind of the gist of what the question was all about, but we're talking about incorrect beliefs we held at the beginning of our career that upon reflection we now know are not correct beliefs. And in the meantime, if anybody has questions while we're kind of getting warmed up here, go ahead and put your question right there into the chat and I will put you into the queue. And also, I do need to give a shout out to Vivian for doing such an amazing job of hosting the happy hour for me last week. I had a opportunity to listen back on that, and I'm not gonna lie, that was hands down my favorite happy hour. Makes me wonder if I should be here at all anymore. I should let you guys take over more often for me. But yeah, let's go to Makiko. And I've been a un-American for so long that I forgot that it was Memorial Day weekend. I was too busy celebrating the Queen last week. But yeah, let's go to it, Makiko.
Oh, that's right. You're in Canada. Territories.
With your very,
No,
very American background, I love that.
I know, right? Yeah, I honestly, I'm not traveling. We got double vaccinated, but yeah, we're not do we're going for the tier one, friends and family, right? And then we'll expand it out to tier two, which is, adjacent friends and family, and then tier three, which is coworkers. Although I'm not going to see my coworkers because they're in Atlanta. So I won't see them for a little while. But yeah, I think the two probably the two beliefs were like, okay, three, but they're short. The first one was that credentials matter. That's something that, you know, even nowadays I kind of struggle with, sort of that imposter syndrome in like machine learning, data science, just because so many people are kind of like pushing their degrees and like, you know, education clout. And there used to be a lot of shame about that. And now I actually feel a lot better. I think part of it too, right, is because I think data science and machine learning is a little bit closer to academia. But now that I'm sort of mingling with a lot more like engineers and developers, I see that like for them, it's, you know, they're like, if you have like a bachelor's in computer science, but you can code really well, people are kind of good with that. So it's definitely like a total culture mentality shift. But I think in general, if someone's going into data science and machine learning, they should worry a lot less about the credentials and whether or not they could do the work. The second one was that it's all about like technology, and less about soft skills. And I'm gonna be really honest, like, you know, now that I'm on like an actual like engineering team and an actual engineering org, where there's like a senior machine learning engineer, there's a staff machine learning engineer, there's principal, and just, you know, I'm seeing that, you know, the reality is that like I talked my way into most jobs. So I'm just gonna be real. Like I couldn't pass leak code to like save my life, or, you know, to pay myself. You know, so soft skills really matter, especially when you're dealing with a lot of the like the architecture side of MLOps. Like even within some companies, they're using sort of different stacks or pipelines, and you really have to speak well with people. You have to understand the complexity, and you have to, you know, even like navigating all the different Slack channels. You just got to know like who to ask questions, and you got to be comfortable asking questions. So soft skills, I think, matter a lot more at this point. I think the third major one was well, yeah, no, I think actually it was just those first two, is credentials and, you know, sort of not valuing the soft skills part. um I think those were the two big ones for sure.
Shout out to some friends in the audience. What's up to Greg? What's up to Albert Bellamy? Albert is a uh, service member. Are you considered veteran? I'm not sure, Albert, but my friend, thank you for your service. Oh shit, we got the one and only Benjamin, the Seattle data guy, is in the building today. How freaking awesome is that? Ben, what is up, my friend? If you'd like to take the floor on this, Ben, we're warming up with a question here. And the topic of the question is, what's one belief or a couple of beliefs that you held at the beginning of your career that, looking back now, reflecting on that, was just an incorrect belief to have? So if you'd like to take over, Ben, go for it.
I'm trying to think about like, I mean, I think like the biggest focus, and maybe it's, I don't know if it's a belief, but like my personal biggest thing was like setting up like a data science was my goal consulting company. Um, Only to find out, one, personally, I like data engineering more. I think that was one thing. It's like, you know, I think the articles you read might hype you up for like data science, but then like you start doing the work and it's like, well, but I like doing the engineering work more than I like doing the analytics work anyways. So I think that was kind of like one personal belief of something that shifted. And then also just the fact that there's just so much data engineering work to be done. So I think those are like the weird things that shifted. One, just, you know, when it comes to consulting, it's a lot easier to find projects that are data engineering. And two, I like doing that work anyway, so might as well do it. So short answer, but since I just jumped on, no.
Yeah, no, that's all good, man. Appreciate having you here, man. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to come hang out with us today. Joe, what about you? What's a belief that you a misbelief that you held? And after Joe, let's go to Greg. And guys, if you have questions, let me know. I'll add you to the queue. I know that Al had a question, so we'll go to Albert after Greg. So we'll go Joe, Greg, and then Albert.
I've been in the data space for a really long time, like going on over 20 years now. So, you know, and I think the things, I always have to remind myself that what's, you know, old is new again. There's really nothing that novel, actually, I'm realizing. Actually, I was just chatting with a friend of mine about this. You know, because we're going over some brand new architecture that he's coming up with. He's He's actually one of the guys who wrote Hive at Facebook back in the day. He's coming up with a brand new architecture that we're kind of jiving on. And it's interesting because he's going back to the classics too, like, classical architectures and articles from like the 90s and crazy stuff. And I've been doing a lot of the same thing recently, like, researching old stuff and reviewing old books I have. And what I realized, like, there's not a lot of new stuff out there. It's maybe repackaged. So data science, machine learning, that's a repackaged thing that's kind of actually been around for a really long time. And so I think that for me, it was just a realization that I need to spend more time understanding the history and context of things rather than trying to chase after the latest shiny object. It's something that over my career I've just had to constantly remind myself of that there's probably some precedent that's come before, and like what you're trying to do isn't actually that new at all. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, the wheel's already been invented, so go find that wheel. So otherwise you have a cold start problem every single time. So
yeah, it's an interesting point. I like that point about kind of returning to the old stuff, returning to the classics. I've been reading this book this week. It's like a book from almost
that is
10
such
years
a good
ago.
book.
Yeah, How to Solve It by George Paulia. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but oh my God, this book is helping me think about how to solve problems in a very refreshing way. If you guys are part of the newsletter, I sent you a PDF copy or a link to a PDF copy of this book. So definitely open your email
especially if you're learning, if you're doing anything with math.
Mhm.
That book is fantastic.
Yeah, there's a lot of geometry in that book, which came in handy because I was recently reading Shape by Jordan Ellenberg, which is all about geometry. I actually interviewed him for my podcast yesterday,
Nice.
and it was just, lots of geometry. And this book has a lot of geometry, and it's good. It's a good book. Greg, what about you, man? What the topic already, so go for it.
Yeah, so for me is more related to my degree. I'm an industrial engineer, and the way I looked at it, I guess, is because of the program. I had to learn a lot of the cross engineering functions, like whether it's mechanical, chemical, material. I had to know a little bit of everything, and there were some core classes that I took, which focused around operations research. So when it comes to optimizing routes or optimizing how much you want to order from a supplier, and things like that. And there was a good dose of statistics in there. Once I entered the workforce, I kind of shielded myself from this repackaged thing that Joe described earlier, which I fully agree with him, is that industrial engineers have nothing to do with the whole data science thing. And I spent the first, 7 years just shielding myself, at least almost 10 years, really not realizing that, look, I've been so deep into it during my school, and I never really cared, from a statistical process control perspective, that's all you're doing. You're controlling your production line. And to operations research, if you look at neural networks trying to optimize, their output, through gradient descent, backpropagation, and things like that. So it's all doing some sort of optimization of the algorithm, and those are the things that if I feel like if I focused on it a little bit more, I'd be more of a confident to call myself a data scientist. Today, I market myself as someone who's more on the business side, but also understands data science. And I feel like every time I want to deep dive into the data science piece, that I'll be wasting time, because I also love the business side, because that's what drives really companies. The bottom line is money, and I want to be able to build the bridge between both. So still today, it's a struggle for me, but I enjoy being in the middle. But ultimately, I want to stay on the business side.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Greg. Let's go to Albert. Albert, my friend, why don't you answer our question and then ask the question that you had? Then after Al, we'll go to Makiko's question. And if anybody else has a question, let me know. I'll add you to the queue.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so I mean, I would say mine, since I'm new to data science and analytics anyway, is mine is more for leadership. And I think the thing when I was a new Marine and just getting put into junior leadership positions, it was that that everybody needs to be led or can be led the same way. That you know, that'll, if you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Well, you know, Marines are expected to be hammers, and so you get the feeling that you can kind of shout everyone into submission, and that's how everybody responds. And it's, you know, nothing could be further from the truth. So it took me a long time to kind of realize that, hey, a good leader needs to figure out what his or her teammates, team members, subordinates, whatever you want to call them, how they need to be led, and how to best leverage them and their skills and strengths. And just as I went on, then there was more and more kind of tools in my toolbox that, hey, you can yell at them, and you can cuss at them, and you can, you know, knife in and foot stomp and all that good Marine stuff, and or you can be diplomatic and kind of reason with them, or you can, you know, kind of beg and plead. But that there's 100 different ways to lead somebody and get them on board with your project. And a good leader, to me, has more than one. So hope that fits the bill for the question here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
And you got a question as well, so go for it.
I do. So just for context, so we today on Analytics Job, we did our first live stream, and that was very exciting. And you know, so we just wrapped up season 2, where we had, I don't remember what it was like 20 or 22 guests or something like that. And some of them were repeats from the previous year. And so, you know, it's just kind of looking for the way forward and what, you know, what are we doing next? We have some things going, but I look around at a lot of different podcasts and YouTube channels, and it seems like the interview format is pretty saturated. And I'm wondering, you know, what do the people here think that are involved in some way in that business, either as podcasters, as YouTube channelers, or as consumers of, you know, of that kind of content? What do you think are the underserved people, the people that don't get called up for interviews, and what are the underserved topics? Because I saw that Kate Strasny did, I don't know if it was today, but she was doing a webinar on data security, and it didn't seem like it was getting traction. And so that kind of got me to thinking, like, what are the topics? What are the people that we're not getting to in our interview cycles, in our discussions, and that sort of thing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. For sure, Harpreet Sahota is definitely an underserved topic in data science podcasts, because nobody ever invites him on their podcast. But also, I would say so in terms of like format and type of episode, like it'd be cool to see storytelling type of episodes. I was thinking about doing this for my podcast, right? Because when I have data scientists on, I tend to ask a lot of similar questions, because I want to get a whole breadth of and range of responses on a particular topic. And I was thinking about doing something where I tell a story and weave in, you know, some responses from different people, and then, you know, mix in some like nice music and sound effects in the background. So that's one thing I think would be interesting to see, storytelling type of episodes. But in terms of topics, I mean, I would love to hear more about like methodologies, like how are people solving problems? I think that, and maybe just because I've been thinking about that, maybe because I got this How to Solve It book on my mind, I'd be really interested in hearing about what people do when they come across problems that are really hairy, really messy, and how they think their way through some of those problems. But I'd love to hear some more from the audience. Spencer Hawley, my friend, welcome to the Art of Data Science. Let's hear from you, man. What's some topic that you would love to hear more about that doesn't get the coverage or clout that you think it deserves?
I've seen one of these before a couple weeks ago, and from that I followed Vin on LinkedIn, and I saw he had a post where he's talking about just the way he's talking about knowing the business and understanding that, and really focusing more on the business side than I feel like most people really talk about, and saying how that's like a lot of, like, anyone knows the tools and can learn the machine learning models, but you've got to apply that in a way that'll actually generate the right kind of results. So maybe, like, if anyone knows kind of a good way to start learning that side of things, because, like, I was thinking about it, it seems like almost the most logical way, in a way, and not saying it is, but what to me might make sense is like kind of almost, you almost have to come in on the business end. I'm not sure that that's true, but that's kind of what it looks like to me. And I don't know if anyone thinks, like, has any advice for people coming in from a more technical side or more technical background.
I find that really interesting, right? Maybe like if somebody could have like a series, or maybe just like an episode. Maybe I should do this with a podcast and have an episode called like maybe The Forest for the Trees, and it's like an hour-long episode where I talk to people about how they've used random forest in their different industries, and like kind of put that together and talk about how we, here's this algorithm that we all know and love, but here's how we implemented it in our business use case. Let's hear, I'm going to call from people in the audience who have their camera off. So Martin Garza, let's hear from you. Martin, if you're talking, you're muted. Or if you're put on the spot, if you don't want to.
No, I'm sorry, Harpreet. I have here my little kid, and my have the
hi little kid in the back.
Zoom conference. Say hi, Leo. Hi.
Oh my gosh, she's so cute. She just sounds so cute.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. About how to approach the problem, right? You're talking about.
Well, the question Albert's curious about is, what's some topic or area that you feel like doesn't get enough exposure in data science podcasts or data science content that you would like to see more content around?
Oh, okay. Well, as I'm really new in this area of data science or data analysis, I have heard that you talk very focused on advanced topics, and I'm somewhere trying to catch up, right? I'm having a little bit of troubles. I mean, I was talking with Jennifer Nardin, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, for trying to search for an internship, right? But I mean, I'm a Mexican guy in the border with Texas, and I'm having had a little bit of trouble getting a job, right, as a data analyst. But maybe how to enter, how to start with this kind of data analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have experience in the industry on manufacturing side as an operations manager, and the analysis is a lot over there, but being on this of data analysis is really, really a deep theme to start knowing, right?
Yeah, I like that too. It's a bit of a common theme there so far that I'm picking up on. But Benjamin, how about you, man? You're a bit of a content creator yourself. In if I'm not mistaken, the Seattle data guy. What do you think? I mean, besides data engineering, what do you think is an underserved topic in our field?
Man,
Podcast and content.
I think like data engineering is obviously one. Like I barely feel like I just started with data engineering, and I'm already getting a lot of people responding in such a way where they're like, "Wow, this is great." There's not a lot of DE content, but there's just not a big DE audience. I think we're still working on that part. I mean, I think I like that whole forest and tree concept, because when it comes down to it, I think as much as I feel like there's a ton of MLOps tools that are coming out, and people, that's been over the last year or two, definitely been gaining traction. I still talk to a lot of data scientists, and there's just this gap of operationalizing ML that oddly still exists. I was literally talking to someone yesterday, and they're like, oh yeah, we're talking to like Data Robot and whatever, all these other things, and we're gonna like figure out how to like launch our ML model. I'm like, well, how are you gonna do it? I'm just curious. Like, okay, do you actually know how Data Robot works? Do you know what your plans? Like, no, but Data Robot says they'll deal with it for us. I was like, okay, cool, but you should probably figure out how to still like, yeah, just plug in Data Robot and then it'll work. That's not so. I think there's an odd gap still there where, you know, there are obviously communities like MLOps community that's doing a lot in that space, but for some reason, like you said, like there's still this weird gap where it's like, okay, I built this model, now what? You know, and I've worked at companies, when you look at big tech, a lot of them have systems, right? They have their MLOps systems, and they've had it for the last 5 years, and this is, you know, for them it's easy. But yeah, I'm always curious to see like, what do companies do if they don't have 10,000 engineers who can manage these kind of data ML pipelines? So I'm curious, like what smaller companies are doing, like how are they trying to manage this? How are they implementing it? How is it actually working? And how are they dealing with all the challenges that comes with you know, getting ML people up to speed? And actually, speaking that out, I think that's another whole area, which is like onboarding. It's this weird section as well. Like I remember when I first started kind of trying to do data science work, I was working with like a data science team at a hospital, and it just kind of felt like they let me like flop around for like a few months, and didn't really provide me much like basis in terms of like, oh, this is how we, you know, proceed on projects. This is how we take a project from like an idea or a theory into some sort of final product, and even having that like ability of like best practices, just better set up for us, I think is an area that would be great for a lot of people. Because yeah, once you start, it's really like, okay, but what do I do, right? Like you have all these tools, but you have no idea how they actually all work. So I think that would be interesting for me.
Yeah,
I think
just
that
kind of
to add to that too, I mean, Makiko had asked a question earlier about what are some good tools or good resources to learn like MLOps and MLE, ML engineering. And frankly, it seems very underserved right now. Kind of, it's almost worse than data engineering in some ways, although I would say there's maybe more content in machine learning engineering right now. I would say there's more noise as well. So your signal to noise ratios a bit out of whack. As far as data engineering content goes, I think Ben, myself, and Andreas might be some of the only people who are actually doing anything in this area. I'm sure there's others. But yeah, I would say that, you know, the MLOps community is awesome. Shout out to Dimitrios for putting that together. Like, I would say just come through that and just see what you can find. But unfortunately, there is a ton of noise right now. Laszlo, the person whose article you posted, he's legit. So obviously, you know, Josh Tobin's course, he's legit. But I mean, you talk to anybody in the field right now, and it's there's not really a consensus in terms of how any of the best practices like kind of shape up. Therefore, it's kind of impossible to have a rubric in terms of how to properly do ML engineering, just because it's a field that's in flux right now. And so it's a very underserved content area.
yeah.
And it's funny that Benjamin mentions like onboarding, because I'm going through onboarding for the MLE team right now, right? And and like I have my onboarding cohort, right? So my team was nice enough to put together like this onboarding document, that the 30, 60, 90-day plan. You know, here are the people that you meet, here are the tools and processes, here are all the stuff. But the rest of the engineers in my cohort didn't get anything like it. They haven't even met their team, even though like I've been like in close contact with like the staff engineer on my team, right? He's been guiding and like doing an unofficial onboarding cycle for the last 3 weeks in this week, right? So, but that onboarding stuff, like that's like so hard. And I see it, the other engineers like in my group who are also working not necessarily like on the same team, but some of them are DE, some of them are like, you know, back end, some of them are front end dev, and they're really kind of struggling because we're all working on like an ML product. And they're like, okay, so, right, so already you're struggling with the complexity of onboarding as an engineer, but then you have to also know like all the different systems and pipelines. And they're also going through this process of where they're like updating it too. So like for sure, like onboarding is like so important.
This is interesting commentary. It reminds me of like when like onboarding of data scientists back, I would say in the kind of early / mid 2010s. Very similar, because there wasn't really any set of guidelines for how to onboard, and so people just kind of make it up as they go along. Unfortunately, that's just the reality. But that same thing was with data scientists. I don't know if it's got any better, frankly. But engineers are supposed to be the ones that produce the discipline and the rigor behind everything to make the data scientist succeed. So this will be, yeah, keep us posted how this goes.
Yeah, so if I could distill down the last few topics for Albert, the kind of threads I picked up on there would be maybe a topic about how small or startup teams are functioning at smaller companies where maybe their data science practice is immature. There's also some talk there about MLOps, and I believe from Makiko, the vibe I got was how to onboard new teammates. Let's hear from Greg, and then after Greg, let's hear from Russell. What are some data science, or just let's just call it data, just data topics that you would like to see covered in podcasts or different contents? And then after that, we'll get to Makiko's question and Christian's question after we hear from Greg and Russell.
Yeah, something I've been getting curious about lately is we always talk about we have to clean data, clean data. Can we hear more about data collection, right? So is it ever possible to collect data clean at first try, right? So what are the tools? What are the best practices? The other day I saw Vin issued a podcast, not podcast, a video on YouTube about something called Data Curator. I must admit, I haven't watched the video yet, but I have a feeling it's speaking to that person who will be responsible for onboarding clean data that you don't have to spend much effort transforming as you feed it to models and things like that. So I don't think I hear that enough. Like we talk about cleaning, but what if we understand we can do much about legacy collection methods, but what about fresh new collection methods that will guarantee, maybe if we think big about this, that the collection will be of high quality, that we don't have to spend much time transforming for the perfect model output?
Yeah, I like that. I was actually so part of data science dream job. I create my entire team. We create these technical workshops, like, you know, every month or so. And one of the technical workshops I got planned for this summer is actually on that topic, is data collection. Like, okay, great. Everybody says you have to do a data science project to show your skills, but how do you get data? How do you collect data? So yeah, that's very much in line with something I was thinking about. Let's go to Russell, and then after Russell, we will go to Makiko's question, then Christian's question. And if you guys have questions, let me know in the chat. I will add you to the queue.
Evening all. I was just adding a comment probably a few minutes back now, just talking about domain expertise being really critical for a fully holistic data analysis. So learning data science, data engineering, ML, and being a rock star in that field is great, but if you don't understand the actual context of the data that you're using, it's going to be more difficult to get the output, the insights from that data to resonate with the audience. And you may struggle to understand the, say, the limits of that data. So if you've got some outliers that you immediately cut off because they seem completely unnatural in the context of the data on the page you've got. But if you understood the field, you would know that could manifest naturally. So you don't want to exclude it. All of that's really important. And then tying in with the kind of the business intelligence side of things, actually the cosmetic and the aesthetic of arranging something on a page as well, that varies distinctly from industry to industry. So having the domain expertise to help transition right the way through from that data side to the report output is very good. And what Greg was mentioning there about the data curator, data translator, that's pretty much where I sit. I'm not a distinct data scientist. I'm probably more data engineering than anything else, but I've been working with data for some 20 years or so before I even heard the terms data science. So yeah, I put myself in that page, and very often I will bring data in and do some pre-processing on it before it goes to someone for deep analysis. Very often that's still myself, but also the other teams. But also will validate the output as well to make sure that nothing has happened in the data processing that's created anomalies or anything else. So that data curator role, I think, is is a much wider role than just the processing of the data before it goes through for analysis.
Thank you very much, Russell. Yeah, I saw that video by Vin as well. It's a really good one. All of Vin's videos are freaking awesome. Wish he was here today. Shout out to some friends in the audience. I see you guys. Marina, Tor, good to see you guys here. Happy to have you guys here. Robert, what's going on? So let's go to Makiko's question.
Actually, I had two additional ideas on the like what are underserved topics.
Yeah.
So the first one actually is communication, and not via data visualization. Literally talking to people, especially on failed projects. I mean, talk about like underserved, right? A lot of times I feel like when you look at kind of videos or content on how to communicate with your business partners, a lot of times like the example that's used is a very clean, like successful example. But you know, the reality is that career advancement and not necessarily career growth, but like personal career development, right? But career advancement through a company, a lot of times is on how do you handle the hard conversations. Like, how do you tell them like, okay, the forecast was off by like 10, 15%, which resulted in like a $1 million loss, right? Now, a lot of people won't necessarily like in their junior years, like go for that, like they won't have to be in that situation because hopefully their managers are not giving them $1 million projects, but giving them, you know, maybe $100,000 projects or whatever. But I think that one is really hard. And for a lot, and you know, I think the common sort of stereotype, right, is that a lot of like people, especially who are engineers or data scientists or researchers, academics, they don't know how to talk, they don't know how to communicate, and there's almost no material on that, right? So there's that. That I think that's an understood topic. I think the second one, and Sano actually has already said this, but I think I want to add sort of further support for it, is how do like small, medium-sized businesses like effectively use like data science and machine learning, or even just statistics or math, like in their processes. So I posted a link. This was required reading for my staff engineer to me, right? Because we use GCP at MailChimp, but there's a question of how much GCP do we use and where is it appropriate versus using like an open source or a homegrown thing. And the reality is that like a lot of this thought process on how companies should implement MLOps and ML engineering, it's driven by bigger companies who have like buildings of data centers. A lot of times their use cases are much more sophisticated and, you know, they're a lot more abstract. But reality is that like if you're a small, medium-sized business owner, you probably don't need everything. You could probably just get some added value, like just from simple tools. So I think that's like a really good area as well. Is not just like how do people do starter projects or how do people use like enterprise level tooling, but how do people just kind of determine like what's the right need and like how to implement it for them while still kind of going by like best practices for the most part. I think those are two topics.
Yeah, well, Gilbert's
like
got
to
that
add.
book. I was
Yeah.
gonna say, Gilbert's got that book, People Skills for Analytical Thinkers. You guys should check that out. But sorry, go on, Makiko. Didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, totally. Yeah, like I mean, like I saw that book. I think one of the most successful sort of or I guess one of the resources I liked using when I was first getting into data science was this resource called like LOMS, which is Look Over My Shoulder, from this guy Victor Chang, who is like a BCG McKinsey consultant. And that's what he kind of does is he puts people like into sort of hotbox scenarios and then literally goes like, here are the different levels of communication. This is what poor communication looks like, successful communication, and like awesome, we'll get you a promotion communication looks like, and how to break it down, which I thought was like a really kind of successful way to go about it. And it was helpful for me. But yeah, in terms of my question, it was, I mean, there's a lot of resources like in MLOps, ML engineering. And I think I'm just trying to figure out like better filters. Like how do I filter to the content that is actually important versus is like company marketing or like white papers or stuff. Like, Joe, do you get what I'm saying?
No, I totally get what you're saying.
Okay.
And there's a couple threads to this. One, your Google comment was interesting. I was actually climbing the other day with this developer evangelist from GCP, and he brought up an interesting point because he goes into companies, works with the developers at these companies to teach them how to use GCP. And the first thing he said is, look, we do a lot of things at Google our way. We certainly don't do it. We don't recommend you do it our way. But then you read GCP's marketing materials and their case studies, and it's like, you can be just like Google. So I don't, there's a big disconnect, I think, between what marketing teams are saying and what's going on the ground. I see this a lot just consulting. Companies will adopt practices because it's like the Google or Facebook way of doing stuff or whoever, right? And it doesn't apply. And so I don't know how you would. I know exactly what you're saying. I struggle with the same thing. I read a ton, and unfortunately, half the things I read are really lame marketing pieces that probably, they're not that practical and probably shouldn't have been written in the first place. So
I think, yeah, 'cause that's like,
yeah.
I think one of the struggles in like both the MLE, MLOps and data engineering space is that so much of the content and education is being sort of driven by like sales, right?
Mhm.
It's either selling paid premium tools, or it's pushing open source tools, which is totally fine, right? Like, big support for open source, but it's, yeah. Like, for example, when Google dropped Vertex, right? Like, lots of people were like, "Oh, it's gonna replace all the MLE teams." And then I asked my staff,
No.
my staff engineer, and he's like, "Yeah, and then he's like, "Yeah, no, it's not gonna replace us because we're a practice. We're not a tool." And then Sri was posting all the LinkedIn posts where he's like, "Yeah, this is just the AI platform that's repackaged, and then they have some features that they
Exactly.
haven't even released yet." So it's like, I think I'm trying to figure out the practice and how to continue growing in that practice in a way that is not sort of tool dependent.
The way I did this back in when the big data days were starting out, and I think data science was kind of kicking off, and what I still do is I just read a ton. And I think by just absorbing an inordinate amount of material is the only way you're going to figure out like what is bullshit and what's not, because you have to develop that filter. And I think after a bit, you start understanding, okay, like this article is probably going to suck. Don't even read it. This article's good. Probably read it. And then you start getting, I think, more importantly, a sense for who's writing and who are the people worth paying attention to. But again, there's so much noise right now in the MLOps space. Like I talked with Demetrios about this, and he runs the community, and it's like, it's so noisy. It's really hard to make sense of all this stuff.
Can I give you guys can I share a little framework with you guys that I've been learning lately for to push you to the next level? I think a lot of most hirers, they hire you to kind of not only perform the task at hand, but also if you want to move higher than where you are, you have to make people dream. You have to make people think about the next 3-5 years. So somebody like you, Mikiko, you come across a bunch of these technologies, bunch of these options. You have to learn to put them inside of a framework where you're offering these options that will transform your department, transform your company. And then these options come with risk. If you are able to translate those risks for a leader to understand what's at stake when they select option A versus B, then you become that person who thinks for the future transformation of the company. That puts you way ahead. You don't have to be right. People know you're not there to be right about the future, but you're here to assess and mitigate the risk of selecting GCP method versus another one. So maybe if you go with that framework, you'll be much more comfortable. Of course, you got to do some due diligence when you explore those different options so you can have a better idea of what would be the best path to success by selecting the best option based on XYZ parameters that you would set. I think those are the things that would transform you and put you on the map for, you being on the leadership team very fast. So I'm learning this right now, and it's I wish day one when I joined I knew it. So, and this is what I'm applying daily right now going forward, and I've learned to eliminate noise by focusing on that only.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. If I could pay some bills real quick, who does have some awesome content around MLOps is Comet ML. Not only that, they have an awesome platform. So definitely check out their stuff. Comet ML is cool and definitely a leader in the MLOps space. Benjamin, let's hear from you on this topic. I guess we can kind of blend together the question that Makiko had with the question that Marina is asking in the chat, just recommended readings in MLOps and ML Dev. Was that also kind of along the same lines as your topic, Makiko? Makiko was asking, how do I cut through the noise and find good resources on that particular topic?
I think that's kind of. I was more like, I was actually thinking more about commenting just earlier when Joe mentioned like the comment of like noise and dealing with that. I think we're dealing with this interesting thing where I like to say it's similar to the whole photography craze that we like when like iPhones and things like that came out. People kind of asked the question like, well, why would we pay for photographers, right? Like, you know, we can now take high quality pictures, and then suddenly we all realized we were very terrible at taking pictures, even when we have like the best camera we possibly could, right? Like, you know, having a great photographer makes a lot of sense. So I think it's similar with like content. I think we're realizing that like really good content is like worth paying for. There's not a lot of people that can do it well. I think generally like when it comes to like MLOps type things, like the stuff I usually like reading is anything that like any of the bigger companies like put out. Like I know that, and I mean like the engineering team. So like Netflix, I'm usually like following them, or Uber, or just because I'm curious, like, you know, they're the ones who are having to deal with a lot of these bigger problems. So I'm like, okay, well, how are they dealing with a lot of these problems? Where are they implementing things? I saw that Joe referenced Google's article, so that's why I generally like seeing what they're actually doing rather than I think focusing purely on like one person. It's like, so usually these are teams that are having to deal with these problems, not like one person. So yeah, generally any of those companies, I think that's where I like looking into in terms of like looking at their pipelines, looking at their architecture, and trying to figure out what works and what doesn't.
Right on. Thank you, man. If anybody else got any comments on this topic, let me know within the next second or two. But if not, then we are going to go to Christian's question here. And if anybody else has questions, go ahead and let me know right there in the chat. I'll add you to the queue. Christian, doesn't look like anybody else wants to talk about MLOps at this moment. But go ahead and go for it. Then after Christian, we'll go to Greg.
Yeah, just maybe a more basic question, but it's got me thinking. Recently was doing interviewing. Obviously, I switched jobs a few months ago, and I was interviewing for roles that I didn't have any experience with, like some product manager roles and things like that. But from a title perspective, right, I had experience in kind of the intrapreneur sense of spinning products within a company, so you can tell that story, and that's the story I told. And it's actually pretty compelling when you put a story to the pain points of a business that you can understand, and you know their competitive market and all that kind of stuff. And it's great. You can say, hey, to Greg's point, let me paint you a vision of what it's going to look like for me to be here for the next year or two. Here's the immediate things that I'm going to do that you're probably not doing right now that will really help you. And that seems to be something that I think is a recipe for a lot of people to be able to like get in the door when you maybe don't have the credentials or whatever it might be, or you don't have the title on your resume. But I'm wondering, to what extent does that also carry over to like a data science role, which is also very multifaceted and also needs to think about the outcomes, but maybe, at least from an outsider's perspective, has a lot more to do with technical chops as well. So like, does it vary, or is that a really good strategy for interviews as well in the data world, is my general question.
Yeah, great question. Let's turn this one over to let's go to Greg for this question, but we won't go to your actual question after this, Greg. Let's see if you got a good response here for a question, Christian.
So question pardon me, but I'm gonna have to ask you to write ask the question again so I can make sure I grasp it.
So generally, and let me be more concise. Generally, I've had good experience at with interviews in other fields of painting a picture of how I would make an impact at a role that I might not have done before. Mm-hmm. And that gets me in the door. Even if I don't have the technical capabilities, let's say, on paper. Have you seen that work in the data science world? Do you think that works in the data science world? Does it vary? And kind of what are your comments and thoughts around that?
Yeah. I don't see any variations. And I say this because just about every single business use case that I bring to the data science team, one thing for sure before we even start, whether it's a software that we're going to build that is powered by, ML, we have to have what we call entitlement. And that entitlement is what really drives agreement, alignment on working on that project. So that entitlement is something that is directly correlated or directly connected to how much money the business is going to make. Is it going to make us more money? Is it going to save us more? Those are the things that you want to make sure you connect with. At the end of the day, a project is a project, right? So there's no difference. The only difference with data projects is that you have to have the best practices on how to manage that data, because that's the one thing that you're relying on for your software or your product to, I guess, act as expected to deliver some results. So you have to find a way to definitely build the bridge between your technical aptitudes to manipulate that data with an increase in the business sales or a decrease in cost, or something like that. So you have to find that way, and it's no different than any other projects. So if you can market yourself this way, you'll be good to go. Of course, there are some other technical improvement projects that you could do. I know a few, like hopping off of an old architecture to a new one that would reduce total cost of ownership of that architecture. Those are the things that you can think about. And at the end of the day, it's about really thinking about the future transformation of the business. If that new architecture is going to help you serve more business needs and also be cheaper for you to manage with less overhead or headcount, or less data bill, that I call it, then this is something that's a clear win to anybody who understands the nature of the business that they're driving.
Let's go to Makiko next. And so the question just, I just saw the written version here. To reiterate it, in other roles I've interviewed for, product or business, telling a customized, compelling story upfront has yielded good results. Here's my intro. Here's where I see me plugging into your team, how I can help, what I know about you and your competitors. Does this approach work with data science hiring managers as well? Or is there a tighter focus on technical aptitude? We'll go to Makiko for this one because you're talking about this just at the beginning of the hour here. So I think you'd be well suited in this situation.
Yeah. Okay. So for data science hiring managers, it'll depend on what the primary output is of the team. So if the team is more research focused, so first off, there is never a reason why you shouldn't do a customized, compelling story, and why you shouldn't sort of position yourself. There is never a reason why you shouldn't do that, right? The difference is what certain hiring managers will care about, and what the difference is whether it's a research versus like an engineering role versus something that's a little bit more strategy oriented. Even when I was interviewing for the MLE roles, there was a difference between companies like Quora, where they wanted a lot more emphasis on research, and specifically certain things like what papers did you publish, or what algorithms did you implement recently from papers? What do you think about XYZ implementation versus the ones who are a little bit more development focused or engineering focused, which was, what projects what projects did you work on? What were the architectural components, and what were the decisions and trade-offs that you made? And then there's also ones who are a little bit more like strategy, So for example, Facebook, a lot of their data scientist roles, they call them data scientists, but they're really more like product analyst roles. And so they will care very much so about the about like how did you connect like the experimentation or the work that you did with the KPIs and the outcomes for your team. And really, I think actually that's the biggest differentiator. Is like what is their like outcome, or what is their KPI in a way that they're tied to. For business strategy folks, it's what was the impact on like certain core product metrics or certain core like business financial metrics, depending on what team you're serving. For the research folks, it really is about like, what papers did you write up? What blog posts did you contribute to? What are the things that the company could, sort of put on their blog, put on their website saying like, yay, we're AI driven. And then for the engineering folks, it's literally like, what did you build, and like, did it break? And what best practices did you use? So that's where I think where the differentiation is between like those three teams. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to figure out what the team is until you get into the interview, because a lot of the job descriptions, they will literally just copy and paste between companies. So they won't necessarily always say up front, you know, but once you get into the interview, you can just ask them, you can be like, you know, so what is like the primary sort of like impact you want me to have? Is it, yeah.
Yeah, if I could just kind of further on Mikiko's point. So I interview a lot just because I'm not necessarily looking for a new job. I just love being in interviews. I think they're interesting. And plus, if I'm dishing out advice to people at data science dream job, I should at least be going through the same shit that they do. But I do this thing where like I literally won't research a company before going into the interview, and it could be technical and I answer all the questions right, but then I can't put the responses within the context of the business. You know what I mean? Like, and then there's situations where I'll thoroughly research the company and I'll get a real good idea of what their product is. I'll even download the product and play around with it and test it. And those interviews I tend to do a lot better because once I know what the product is like, once I get an idea of what their business is all about, I can deploy my technical knowledge into context, if that makes sense, right? And talk to them about maybe the types of problems I think that they potentially could be facing and some possible ways that they could address those type of problems. Does that kind of make sense? So thorough research. If you really are interested in the company, do thorough research, download their product, play with their product, and then deploy your technical knowledge that you do know, even though you may not have it on paper, to talk about how you can help them solve their problems. Is that helpful at all? Awesome. Yeah, go for it, Christian.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that sounds about like what I'd expect. I haven't interviewed in the data science world, you know, yet at least. So just interesting to hear that feedback. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, we'll go to the next question. And like my dickhead neighbor has his fucking music blasting, and it's like shaking this. So I apologize.
What is he playing?
I have no clue, but it's just bass, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like he's shaking my like things back here. So if it's coming up and picking up through the mic, I apologize.
That's probably the funniest thing I've heard all day. It's awesome. Yeah. Sorry, man. I'm laughing with you, not at
you. Yeah, no worries. All right, cool. So let's go to Greg's question, and if anybody else has a question, go ahead, let me know right there in the chat. I'll add you to the queue. But Greg, go for it.
So my question is not about, I don't think it's about data science. It's more of something that happened that I don't freaking understand why. I don't know if you guys heard that story about Nasdaq that's running out of computer space to store Berkshire Hathaway's stock value. So the other day, did you guys hear that? So Berkshire Hathaway stock value was approaching 400,000, blah, 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 which is the total maximum number on the computer that Nasdaq is storing numbers, which is 400,000, 2 to the 32nd power, right? So the last 4 digits of 2 to the 2nd power are dedicated to decimals. And the rest is a digital digits, right? So Berkshire Hathaway stock price was going to cross that to a point where it wouldn't be able to be correct on the Nasdaq board. And I'm like, how the heck do you select such a archaic computer storing, I guess, size to be stuck in that sense? I think they hurried up to upgrade their computers. And do you guys understand why this happened and like what was done to solve it? I don't know if you heard that story.
I mean, sounds like Nasdaq had a Stack Overflow. Go for it.
My guess is it was similar to like, didn't YouTube had a similar problem, right? Where like the number that they were showing, like they finally hit like bigger than they expected. So they probably set that number, like you said, to something that just whatever it was in the database or whatever it was in the code.
Bit size,
numeric 8,2 or whatever, and then it's like we can't do bigger than this. And then you got, in order to like, it's one of those things where people are like, oh, isn't it easy just to change a data type? It's like, not really. Like, not if it's in like 100 different places. We're gonna have to now go through, right? It's one of those things. So it's like, yeah, probably was a pain. So
yeah.
So I
Joe,
have
great.
go for
a
it,
real
Nikita.
example of this. So actually, MailChimp, the company that I'm now working for, so they are a privately held company, which means that there are a lot of things that are different about it. One of them is that they don't have to do quarterly planning, and they don't have to do major technology updates. It's just whenever they need to, because they're privately held. They're like, yeah, we're never going to go public ever. So we'll just update the engineering when we feel like it. And I mean, nothing I'm saying is like company secret, but they still have a massive, like most of the code is like a PHP based. So, so, you know, it's yeah, you can have some companies and organizations where some companies and organizations, especially like startups or, you know, public companies, they can sometimes just be a little bit too quick on like fail fast and break things and let's change our entire infrastructure and then get stuck between 3 or 4 different vendors. And then you can have the opposite where some companies are like, well, you know, we're privately held. We're not going to make any major changes until we need to. And then, you know, suddenly you start seeing the war room kind of just go off and, you know, I mean, they still deliver like really great service, but, you know, I think we've only started going on GCP within the last 6 years or something, maybe 8. You know, like, so it does happen in practice. It's odd because I think a lot of companies or startups, right? Like we kind of hear them like just kind of switching stuff all the time. So you hear more about like failures or being hacked or something like that. But you have the opposite end of the spectrum too. So.
All right. I'm just gonna as like sign off. Just as a comment on that, Facebook is based on PHP too, so it's just so we're clear. I mean, it's a modified version of PHP, but it's also PHP. But with that, I'm gonna sign off. Thanks guys for allowing me to join. All right. Bye.
Hey man, thanks for coming, man. Happy to have you here. Let's hear from Joe on this topic.
I don't have much more to add. I mean, I'm stoked it happened, but for other reasons. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I could never imagine that the share price would have reached this high to begin with. But that said, you know, someday it'll be $1 million or more a share, I'm sure. That's just kind of how the world works. Compounding is a weird thing. So hopefully it gets fixed. So, I mean, who would have thought though, you know, back in the day that you'd have a stock price this high? They never split. And I don't think they're ever going to, is the whole thing, right? So you just gotta, I guess the whole point is that you can prepare for these contingencies, but even then, you know, as a general rule, I think Russell pointed out life lesson: if any arbitrary limits are set in the system, review them regularly. And this is definitely a big case of that. So, you know, imagine the stock market. And I remember Buffett once, he was saying like, if the stock market continues at the current growth rate, about 7% a year, something like that, you zoom out to the year 2100. The stock market, the Dow needs to be at like 3 million.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, think about that for a sec. You're at what, 30 something thousand right now?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I don't know what protections people have in their systems for a 3 million level Dow index, right? Like that's unfathomably huge right now. But then back in the 20s, I think what the Dow was in like maybe the 2 digits or maybe low 3s. So something to think about.
I feel like this is where Carlos would come in to talk about decentralized currency and and the technology underpinnings for how you would, you know, need to distribute and tabulate and all this.
I guess just don't allow for like overflow errors in your. That'd be a first step. So yeah, it's
Carlos,
crazy though.
If you're listening, Carlos, I don't know if Carlos listens back on these things, but it's been a while since he's been here, man. So come hang out. Otherwise, well, Greg and I are meeting with him on Thursday, so I'll tell him personally that his presence is being missed. If anybody has questions, now is the time to ask. Shout out to friends we didn't hear from. Tor, my friend, always good to have you here. Always good to see you. Missed hearing some of your commentary.
Sorry, I'm not talking too much. I've just been bogged down in transactional data and analyzing for the last couple of weeks. I'm working on an audit. I'm going my 14-hour days now, so I got another couple of weeks to go. Today I was supposed to relocate to Norway and well, didn't have the right test, so they sent me home. So I have to go back again and fly out again on Sunday.
Damn.
So I was actually flying via Amsterdam, and in Holland, they're requiring the PCR test. And in Norway, where I'm going, they just need another type of test. And of course, I didn't have the PCR, so there you go, no flight. And so here I am, still stuck in France, when I should be in quarantine in Norway for the next 10 days.
Well, hopefully you're enjoying some good wine, and you've also presented reason number 314 why you should not be an accountant.
Yeah.
So, what's up to everybody else that was hanging out? Last minute questions. If anybody has questions, we got Ade or Eric. Good to see you here, Eric. And this person with a cool name that I'm gonna butcher. I'm gonna try not to butcher it. Tuli Megamino. And anybody else. If anybody has questions, now's the last time to ask them. Otherwise, I'm gonna stall until it is time to go. Go for it, Makiko.
Anyone else have, I don't want to say hacks. Joe mentioned that he reads on Saturday mornings. He reads 50 to 70 articles. Does anyone else have suggestions for how to be more productive? I'm really struggling with that, especially since I'm trying to get used to waking up 3 hours earlier because all my team's in Atlanta. So I'm really struggling with the productivity part, the learning part.
I carve out like an hour, 2 hours every morning, and that's like the only chance I get to get reading in. Part of that will be like just like I'll be writing, and another hour and a half or so reading. But waking up earlier is the only way, right? If you feel like you don't have enough time, then waking up earlier is your only option to get more time, or just block off chunks of your calendar at work so people cannot schedule meetings with you. I do that a lot too, and I'll just use that time to read as well. Greg, go for it.
I was gonna say, before you do anything, make you go read Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
And then listen to what he says about how much space you have to reorganize yourself.
Yeah,
it'll be helpful.
Tiny Habits is another good one as well.
Tiny Habits, yes.
Yeah, Tiny Habits, BJ Fogg's thing. He's quite active on Clubhouse too. But yeah, Atomic Habits, good. Power of Habit, another good one. All these books on habit out there. Anybody else have any quote unquote hacks or anything they do to get their learning in?
Or even routines. It doesn't have to be a hack, like a routine or ritual.
I think you just answered it, honestly. Like it just has to become a routine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned getting up early. It works.
Yeah.
The problem is you got to go to bed early too. Otherwise your brain like fries and you're retarded.
Yeah.
And you're just you ain't working well.
I have 7 a.m. stand-ups for 3 days a week now.
Gross.
So, well, yeah, 3 hours ahead. So they meet 10 a.m. Atlanta time. So I need to be up 7 a.m. here.
You can be like Jocko Willink and then take a picture of your watch every morning at like 4:30 or some ungodly hour like that when he's up. I get up at 5 usually and read. But there's no, I don't know, there's not really a hack or anything. You just got to make the time and just you got to have it. That's all there is. It's no secret.
I was so good at that before quarantine. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like exercising, right? I mean, you're a CrossFitter. You know how it is. It's like you're gonna make the time for your routine. There's no shortcuts. Anyone who tells you there's shortcuts is bullshit, and they haven't done it. So it's time and energy.
Yeah.
I guess
time that you'd use for other things like watching TV or YouTube, whatever. Use it, but yeah, go for it. Sorry, Mickey, go.
I guess the other half of the question is, so I want to like next level up within the year and a half to get to senior MLE. So what would be the activities I should be prioritizing? I feel like reading case studies is good, but to some degree, like because I'm like really junior on the totem pole for once, which is really nice. It was so nice. But since I'm really junior, I'm not necessarily like in the position to make like technology choices, right? So, but at the same time, I want to continue like upscaling, but development's not the same as advancement. So basically, I want to figure out what are the three or four activities I should be prioritizing.
You want to manage people?
No, I want to go up the technical contributor track.
Okay, that saves a ton of questions then.
Okay.
So, Well, when some people advance, they become a manager, and this usually isn't the best thing in the world for them either, because like
Nope.
most people shouldn't manage. Actually, they have no business doing it. Especially, so that's good. If you got that out of the way, I think that clears it up. I think technical progression is just if to make the weight training equivalent, just sets and reps is really all it comes down to. Maybe set some goals for yourself in terms of learning. So I have a spreadsheet where I have like my learning path basically for like the next 3 months, and just every day basically as a progression, and maybe that's where how you do it. But really it's just when it comes down to being senior though, it's kind of like what is senior for your team, and like what are they expecting you to do. Like that's most of it. And like if you can contribute and add your pull your weight and add value, I think that's how most of the time you become a senior.
Yeah.
I think you're best placed right now to start the conversation now, Mikiko. I wouldn't wait, because when it comes to getting promoted, I think it depends a lot about your manager, right? It depends a lot on that, but you're in control of asking for that path. So for me, Eisenhower, matrix is super helpful to kind of declutter when needed, prioritize the future transformation of a department to addressing the now needed urgencies. So aligning with your manager on what does a senior MLE portfolio looks like in terms of how do you act. So are the things I'm working on, do they have senior MLE scope? You want to align with him or her as fast as possible, and then create a plan for performing at that level, at your current level right now. So if you have some sort of level guideline available right now for how senior MLEs, what do they work on, what kind of tasks, what kind of scope they do have, make a list of these tasks, and then attach the things you're working on next to them to make sure that you're working on the right things. But you have to make sure you have that alignment with your manager as fast as possible to make sure that you get no surprises, you close the gap as fast as possible, and it's a no-brainer when it's time for promotion.
So just a question, kind of follow up, just to drill down a little bit more. So is the objective to move up the ladder in terms of title, or is the objective to move up the skill set in terms of ability? I mean, not that they both like are mutually exclusive, but which one is it that you're trying to optimize for?
So for the short term, it's the skills, because I'm realizing that, especially coming from the data science and data analytics background, I don't want to say I'm a shite engineer, but there's a lot of bad habits and bad practices that I developed, or a lot of good practices I didn't develop because I didn't know until recently. So I think in the short term, it's definitely, I want to add value. It doesn't have to be a huge value, and that value could be just not being like a sink. But I want to add value. I want to develop the first principles skill set. But I want to then translate that into advancement up the ladder. I think with okay, this might be a generalization, but it seems like with engineering, to be honest, it's a lot harder to kind of bullshit your way up. It seems like you do need to hit certain kind of milestones, or sort of have certain projects under your belt. Luckily, I have a meeting with my director next week, so honestly, I'll just bring that up because why not, right?
Yeah.
And they have ladders, they're redeveloping it this year, so it's not super set in stone, but they're working on it. And then my hiring manager, she actually only started this week, and at MailChimp, they don't let managers, or I don't say don't let them. Managers are encouraged to take the first 2 months to do a listening period. So right now she's still getting used to the team and all that. But yeah, because I think something I'm realizing is that there's a lot of data hustle and data grind out there. And what I want to do is try to distill down sort of my activities to what is actually relevant and important. But I think, I'll have that conversation with my director, because I think he'll have he'll have some expectations. So
I mean, well, me, I came from an academic background. I was a proper statistician, like a clinical trial statistician, and then moving into a technology company I had to up my software engineering skills. I like, not that I have any software engineering skills, but I can write good reproducible code that is production ready. But the way I got from 0 to that was I just like put myself onto projects, because I had the luxury of, you know, choosing which project I wanted to work on, and would put myself on projects that I knew were difficult for me, and then would pair program as much as possible with like the nicest engineer who was like most willing, who, you know, they're all pretty nice, right? So for the most part, and just pair program with them and work through problems that way, and then just ask them like, oh, why did you do that? Like, you know, I would have thought about doing it this way, but you're doing it that way. So help me make the leap from, you know, my reasoning to your reasoning, and try to do it that way, if that makes sense. Tor, I see you have your hand up. Go for it.
Sorry. I was just going to say, Makiko, that technically, like everybody in this group, more or less, you're all at the 80% already. It's just the last 20% you need to fill out, because you're asking the right questions. You're curious. You're looking into, you're listening to advice. These are all the things that technically is what's going to get you there. For you, I don't think it's a question of not getting there. It's just a question that you will get there. But I think what's most important is to be a little bit patient and humble, because you may come across as too aggressive, and that scares people. So when you start getting that kind of, um, this is part of my own experience, is that I have a tendency of scaring people because I get very active, involved, and I want to do things and fix things, and I'm not necessarily always listening to the atmosphere I'm in at the moment, and that can scare off a lot of people. But clearly, 80% you're already there. It's just a question now of organizing it, and with the advice you're getting here, there's no doubt in my mind you'll get there. And when you listen to the Joe and Greg and everybody here, uh, they've all been there. They're doing it. They've done it. That's also why they're smiling when they hear the questions as well. So, so good luck with it. Just take your time and you'll get there. Don't worry.
Excellent words of encouragement, Tor. And if you have, I mean, it's just a book recommendation, but if you have Audible and you have like the premium membership, whatever, there's a book on there called The Practicing Mind, and I've been listening to that this week. And one thing that that book really espouses is, and you hear this advice in a lot of different types of philosophy, but um, like disconnecting yourself from the result or the outcome. Like, it's cool to have a goal, but don't let the goal be the end, be all, end all. Let it be kind of more of a directional kind of place, and then use practice and the process as a rudder to steer your way to that goal. So focus more on the practice and practicing, and let go of the goal. A lot of good advice here on books. I saw a book here from Greg called How to Read a Book. That's an interesting one.
I'm ordering all of them on Amazon right now, even as we
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, another book recommendation, Jim Quick's book. That book is amazing. I've enrolled in pretty much all of Jim Quick's online courses. They're really good. Jim Quick, if you're listening, if you're listening, please come on a podcast. Love to have you. He's not listening. He'll never come on a podcast. Guys, no other questions here. I don't see any other questions, but thank you guys so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. Appreciate seeing you guys all here. It was missed you guys last week, and I'm glad you guys are here today, though. Be sure to tune into the episode that released today with Dave Gray, author of several best-selling books, including Liminal Thinking. Next week, I got an episode. Next week is the first Friday of the month, so it's like one of my quote-unquote conversations episode, and I'm doing that one with one of my good friends, Arjun. Arjun is also the host of the Rising Laterally podcast. I think I was on that podcast. Yes, I was. So definitely take a look at that. Other book recommendation, Thinking Fast and Slow. That's a good one. Daniel Kahneman actually, he released a new book just recently too. I think it was called, I can't remember the name of it, but I got it on Audible. Looking forward to digging into.
It's called Noise.
Noise. Have you read it yet?
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. It's on the list. So
yeah,
see how it is. It didn't get that good of reviews for some reason.
Really?
So yeah, but I mean that means it's actually good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I love it. I don't even pay attention to reviews. Like, like just read it if you like the author, right?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
That's
I just finished this book. I love going back to the things that we've been doing for so long and we don't know why we're here. There's this book called Applied Economics. And I've listened to it and I'm like, oh, that's why we like to purchase these things so much.
yeah.
That's why these houses are annoying to purchase, things like that. Oh, that's why this was happening. And it's so good. So it's a good one to get to, Applied Economics.
Yeah, I've got
Hey.
I've got a plan to touch on the fundamentals again this summer. Kind of something I like to do over the summer is go back to like fundamentals and basics. And I've got a few different microeconomic books that I plan on touching on. One of them is microeconomics, not macro, microeconomics for dummies. And I got the cartoon guide to microeconomics. And then I'm doing The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley. Read it once before, but I feel like doing the economics thing again. Get back into it will be good. Sorry, Mikiko, you were saying something.
Greg, author of Practicing Mind. Who is it? Thomas Sterner. Okay.
That's the one.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thomas Sterner.
Yeah, and it's free right now on Audible if you have premium. I've been listening to it, and I feel like it's just like the book that I need to be listening to right now, just because I feel a bit. It happens every now and then. You feel a bit scattered and a bit unfocused in your mind. So I'm looking forward to making my way through that. It doesn't look like there's any other questions right there in the chat. Joe's got another amazing book here, Compounding Passionate Lifelong Learning. All right. So yeah, there's going to be a few books delivered to me this week. So that's going to be awesome.
Can I make a quick confession for you, Harpreet?
Yeah, please do.
So here's one thing. This is my time for you to thank you. Here's one reason. Your show, me being English is my third language, and a lot of times I don't have the confidence to express myself. It's good here. It feels good here. It's confident here, but I'm also questioning how it comes out. And sometimes I don't get, I'm not understood. So your show helps me gain that confidence that I need. So wherever I go, when I talk, I know what I say can be wrong, but also I'm not afraid to get corrected, but from anyone. And this also is practice for me on a weekly basis for any other thing that I get invited in. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate that.
Oh man, it is always my pleasure to have you, my brother. Thank you for being here. Speaking of things that Greg gets invited to, do not forget to register for the Data Community Content Creators Award. Greg is going to be speaking there. Ben Taylor is going to be speaking there. Sarah is going to be speaking there. So is somebody who's got some fire content that hasn't been on my podcast or in these office hours yet, but she does need to. Daliana Liu, and there's Gilbert. Gilbert's going to be speaking there. So definitely go and check that out. Joe, sorry, you had see that you are no. Right on, guys. Well, a lot of good book recommendations. There's a lot of great links here in the chat. I'll be sure to link all that stuff right there into the show notes so that everybody can go through and read all that stuff. Take care, everybody. Have a good rest of the evening, afternoon, and weekend. Long weekend for some of you guys. Remember, you've got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big, everybody? Cheers.